Imagine a time when a simple fever could turn into a death sentence, and the very people who were supposed to heal you often made things worse with strange and dangerous treatments. Bloodletting, leeches, and herbal concoctions were not only common but often deadly. It was an era when questioning a doctor's knowledge was unthinkable, and people placed their lives in the hands of these bizarre methods. Every treatment was a gamble, and more often than not, patients ended up worse than before. Tonight, we will step into this shadowy world where fear, ignorance, and strange remedies dominated people's lives. We will explore how people were forced to endure risky experiments just to survive, and how these frightening practices slowly laid the foundations for modern medicine. If you enjoy these long and relaxing journeys into history, we kindly invite you to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our future videos. And if you like, please leave a comment below with your city and current time. It's wonderful for us to see which corners of the world our stories are reaching. Now, lie back comfortably, let your eyes grow heavy, and join us as we wander through this dark yet fascinating world of medieval medicine, where every treatment carried a risk and every remedy could be a curse. When we peer into the mist of the past, we find an era where illness was a mystery and every cure was a gamble. From the 5th century to the 15th, across the long medieval period, medicine was a strange mixture. A little bit of inherited knowledge, countless assumptions, and an overwhelming amount of fear. In the early centuries of the Middle Ages, illness was often seen as divine punishment, the consequence of sin, or the work of evil spirits. Healing was thought to come only through prayer and devotion. Village healers and church priests served as the main physicians of their communities. Their remedies were rooted in herbs and chants, but their trust lay mostly in prayers, charms, and ritual. One of the most common treatments was bloodletting. At the time, people believed that the human body contained 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. When these humors were out of balance, disease followed. If someone had a fever, headache, or fatigue, the first step was often to reduce their blood. Sometimes veins were cut, sometimes leeches were placed on the body. Some patients recovered, but many grew weaker or died. And yet, people continued to trust in this practice because knowledge was scarce and fear was abundant. As time moved on, monasteries and convents became centers of healing. Monks and nuns cared for the sick, treating them with a combination of herbal remedies and prayers. In the gardens of these monasteries, medicinal plants grew. Some truly were effective. For instance, willow bark, which we now know contains the same compound as modern aspirin. But others were deadly, such as mercury or arsenic, given with the belief that they would cleanse the body. Hospitals began to appear, but they were not hospitals in the way we know them today. They were more like shelters for the poor, the weak, and those near death. Surgeons of this era were often barbers, men who cut hair by day and performed amputations or tooth extractions by necessity. Surgical tools were crude and never sterilized. There was no anesthesia, so pain was unbearable. And more often than not, infection took the patient's life. In 1347, when the Black Death swept across Europe, the weaknesses of medieval medicine became painfully clear. The plague killed tens of millions of people. Physicians had no real answers. Some believed it was caused by the alignment of the planets. Others said it was God's wrath. And so the treatments were the same old ones. Bloodletting, purging, poisonous concoctions, or charms to ward off evil. Some burned herbs and incense in the patient's room, believing the bad air could be cleansed. But none of it worked. In this desperate climate, quacks thrived. They sold miraculous cures, most of which were not only useless but often deadly. Outside of formal medicine, ordinary people turned to household cures. Honey was spread on wounds, garlic was eaten for strength, and teas brewed from roots were used for fevers. Sometimes these simple remedies helped, but more often they were based on guesswork. The line between medicine and poison was thin and invisible. For headaches, some recommended powdered frog or the ashes of a burnt animal bone. For wounds, fat from pigs or cows was applied. If the patient survived, it was seen as proof of the cure. If not, it was explained as God's will. By the late Middle Ages, a few brave physicians began to question tradition. One of the most famous was Guy de Chauliac, a French doctor who insisted on careful observation and detailed record-keeping. He wrote extensively about diseases and surgeries, emphasizing that results should be noted and studied rather than blindly accepted. At the same time, universities began to take shape. For the first time, physicians were formally trained, and medicine slowly moved from ritual and superstition toward learning and research. Still, for the average person, treatments remained brutal and frightening. Surgery without pain relief, remedies mixed with poison, and endless prayers continued to dominate. Even minor ailments carried deadly risks. A small cut could fester into a life-threatening infection. A winter cough might be treated with herbs mixed with toxic minerals. Remedies handed down through families included honey, garlic, vinegar, and poultices made from plants. Occasionally, these worked. Modern science has shown that honey, for example, can prevent infection. But most treatments were accidental guesses. The truth is, many people survived not because of the medicine they received, but in spite of it. The story of medieval medicine is a story of hope and fear intertwined. People were desperate to live, willing to endure pain and risk in the search for health. And yet, out of this darkness came small sparks of wisdom, sparks that would eventually grow into the fire of modern science. When we take a simple fever pill today, or walk into a clean, sterile hospital, we are standing on the shoulders of countless generations who suffered through ignorance, who trusted in rituals, and who endured treatments more dangerous than the diseases themselves. So as you lie back, letting your eyes grow heavy, remember the strange world of medieval healing, a world where every treatment was a risk and every remedy could be a curse. When we explore the history of medieval medicine, it becomes clear that it was not a single, linear journey, but a collection of overlapping themes: faith, superstition, suffering, and survival. Instead of moving through time step by step, tonight we will move through these themes one by one, discovering how they shaped the way people lived, suffered, and hoped in the Middle Ages. The medieval hospital was not like the hospitals we know today. It was less a place of treatment and more a place of refuge. Many were run by monasteries, where monks and nuns provided what comfort they could to the sick, the poor, and the dying. These hospitals were often attached to churches, and the line between spiritual healing and physical healing was blurred. A patient might be given herbs or broth, but just as importantly, they would be prayed over and blessed. For many, healing was as much about the soul as it was about the body. The goal of these institutions was rarely to cure, but rather to care, to offer dignity at the end of life, and sometimes to provide the possibility of recovery through rest, shelter, and nourishment. If you needed surgery in the Middle Ages, the person holding the knife was often your barber. Known as barber surgeons, they cut hair, shaved beards, and, when required, performed amputations, pulled teeth, and lanced abscesses. The tools they used were crude: saws, knives, and cauterizing irons. There was no anesthesia, no antiseptics, and no understanding of germs. The patient's pain was unimaginable, and the risk of infection enormous. Yet surgery was sometimes successful. A broken limb might be set, a tooth pulled to end agony, or an abscess drained to save a life. But the cost was high, and many never survived the procedure itself. The barber's pole, still seen outside shops today, is said to be a symbol of this dual profession, the red and white stripes representing the blood and bandages of their surgical work. Where there is suffering, there will always be those who exploit it. Medieval Europe was filled with quacks, charlatans, and traveling healers who promised miraculous cures. They sold potions of unknown ingredients, powders said to drive out evil, and charms guaranteed to keep plague at bay. Some mixed animal fats with herbs, others used ground bones, or even substances like mercury and arsenic. These so-called cures were not only ineffective but often deadly. Yet, in a world without scientific understanding, people clung to them. Fear made them believe, and desperation made them pay. The line between genuine healers and frauds was difficult to see. Some may have truly believed in their remedies, while others knowingly preyed on the vulnerable. In both cases, the results were often tragic. Superstition was at the heart of medieval medicine. Disease was frequently explained as the work of demons, witches, or the displeasure of God. Treatments often involved rituals, prayers, and protective charms. Astrology, too, played a major role. Physicians consulted the stars to decide when to bleed a patient or administer a potion. The alignment of planets was thought to influence health, and no serious decision was made without consulting the heavens. Some believed that illness could be driven out by wearing amulets, carrying relics, or burning certain herbs to cleanse the air. The boundary between medicine and magic was thin and often invisible. Alongside formal medicine, ordinary people relied heavily on folk remedies passed down through generations. Honey was applied to wounds, garlic was eaten for strength, and vinegar was used to wash sores. Some of these practices contained real medicinal value. Honey does fight infection, and garlic has antibacterial properties. But most remedies were based on trial and error, hope and guesswork. People brewed teas from roots, rubbed ointments made of animal fats, and used poultices of herbs to draw out infection. In some cases, these treatments helped. In many, they did nothing at all. Life was fragile, and even the smallest sickness could prove fatal. Yet these humble remedies represented resilience, the human need to try, to care, and to believe in the possibility of healing. When the plague swept across Europe, all of these themes collided: faith, superstition, quackery, and desperate attempts at care. Physicians prescribed bloodletting, fumigation, and magical rituals, none of which worked. Families turned to charms, processions, and prayers, hoping for divine mercy. Quacks sold miracle powders and potions, and in monasteries and hospitals, monks and nuns tended the sick, often catching the plague themselves. The Black Death revealed the limits of medieval medicine. It showed that no amount of prayer, no charm, and no potion could stop the spread. And yet, through it all, people searched for meaning, for hope, and for survival. By the late Middle Ages, small changes began to appear. Some physicians started to record observations, comparing what worked and what failed. Universities offered formal training, and texts from the ancient world were rediscovered and studied. It was the beginning of a slow shift from superstition to science, from ritual to research. But for most people living in the Middle Ages, medicine remained a frightening gamble, as likely to harm as to heal. When we step back and view medieval medicine thematically, we see not just strange cures and dangerous practices, but also humanity itself, struggling, hoping, and enduring. Hospitals gave shelter, barber surgeons braved the knife, quacks preyed on fear, and superstition wrapped it all in mystery. For the people of that age, medicine was not simply about health. It was about faith, community, and the constant fight to survive in a world where the line between cure and curse was never clear. Tonight, as you lie back and let your eyes grow heavy, imagine that world, where every remedy was a risk, every healer a mystery, and every illness a reminder of just how fragile life could be. History often feels abstract, like a list of facts and dates, but the story of medieval medicine becomes clearer and far more human when we look at it through the eyes of the people who lived and suffered under it. Tonight, let us walk into their world, not through theory, but through the lives of three people. Each one faced illness or injury in a different way, and each one shows us the strange and uncertain face of medicine in the Middle Ages. It is the late 12th century. A knight returns from battle, his arms slashed open by a sword. The wound is deep, dirty, and bleeding heavily. He is carried to a nearby monastery, where monks serve as healers. The first step is to stop the bleeding. Cloths are pressed against the wound, and sometimes spider webs are packed into it, believed to help clotting. Then, a heated iron rod is applied, the practice of cauterization. The knight screams in agony, but this was one of the only ways to close a wound and prevent fatal blood loss. Next, herbs are crushed into a paste. Some contain real healing power, like garlic or honey, which could fight infection. Others are purely symbolic, chosen because of their association with saints or planets. The wound is wrapped tightly, and prayers are whispered over the knight's body. If infection sets in, amputation might be the only option. But there is no anesthesia, no clean instruments, no real chance of surviving a major surgery. The knight's fate lies as much in luck as in medicine. If his body resists the infection, he will live. If not, the treatment itself may hasten his death. Through him, we see the brutal, uncertain world of medieval surgery, half courage, half gamble. Now we move to 1348, the year the Black Death swept across Europe. In a crowded town, a young woman falls ill. She begins with a fever, then painful swellings appear under her arms and along her neck. These buboes mark the plague, and everyone around her knows the terrible truth. Her chances of survival are slim. The town physician visits her home. He wears no protection beyond a cloth mask stuffed with herbs. He prescribes bloodletting, cutting open a vein in her arm to balance the humors. He instructs her family to burn rosemary and lavender in the house to cleanse the air, which they believe is poisoned. Desperate neighbors suggest charms and prayers. Some urge her to wear an amulet. Others tell her to confess her sins to seek God's mercy. A quack in the marketplace offers a miracle potion, claiming it will draw out the poison from her body. Her family, desperate to save her, spends their last coins on it. But nothing works. Within days, she is gone. Her family buries her in a mass grave, alongside countless others. The plague sweeps on, unstoppable. Her story is not unique. It is the story of millions. It shows us how little even the best medieval physicians could do in the face of epidemic. Remedies, rituals, and prayers were powerless against a disease they did not understand. Our final story takes us into a quiet cottage, where a woman labors through childbirth. Midwives attend her, women trained not in universities but through experience, tradition, and inherited knowledge. They prepare herbs to ease her pain, perhaps poppy seeds, perhaps a tea of chamomile or mint. They whisper prayers and encourage her to focus on holy images. In some places, a relic of a saint might be placed near her bed to protect both mother and child. The delivery is long and difficult. If the baby is turned the wrong way, there is little the midwives can do. Instruments are almost never used, and there is no concept of sterile conditions. Infection after childbirth is common, and many women do not survive the days that follow. If both mother and child live, the midwives are praised for their skill and blessed for their care. If either dies, it is explained as God's will beyond human control. This case reveals the intimate side of medieval medicine, the everyday, the domestic, where women carried the knowledge and bore the risk. It shows how fragile life was, and how survival often came down to chance. Through these three lives, a knight on the battlefield, a woman in the plague, and a mother in childbirth, we glimpse the realities of medieval medicine. Surgery was brutal, epidemics were unstoppable, and childbirth was perilous. Remedies could help or harm, heal or poison, and every cure was uncertain. Yet within this darkness, there is also humanity. Monks who tended the wounded, midwives who stayed with women through endless nights, and families who sacrificed everything for the hope of saving a loved one. They remind us that medieval medicine was not only about ignorance and danger, but also about care, courage, and love. The story of medicine in the Middle Ages is not just about strange remedies or outdated practices. It is about real people, people who fought, who feared, who prayed, and who hoped. When we remember their stories, we see not just the failures of the past, but the endurance of the human spirit. Every scream in the surgeon's chair, every prayer whispered over a dying child, every coin spent on a miracle cure, All of it was part of the long journey that eventually brought us to the medicine we know today. So as you close your eyes tonight, let these lives linger in your mind. Imagine the night, the plague victim, the mother. Their stories are the story of all of us, reaching out across the centuries, reminding us how fragile life once was, and how precious it still is. Medicine is one of the clearest mirrors of human progress. When we look at the practices of the Middle Ages and compare them to the science of today, we begin to see not only how far we have come, but also how fragile and uncertain life once was. Tonight, let us walk together through this comparison, slowly, gently, exploring the contrasts between medieval remedies and modern medicine. In the Middle Ages, health was explained through the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Illness was believed to come from an imbalance between them. Too much blood caused fevers, too much phlegm led to coughs, black bile brought melancholy, and yellow bile made one quick-tempered or feverish. Treatment was aimed at restoring balance through bloodletting, purging, or the use of certain foods and herbs. But the real cause of illness remained hidden. Compare this to today. We know that germs, bacteria, viruses, and fungi cause disease. We can see them under microscopes, study their behavior, and target them with antibiotics, antivirals, and vaccines. The medieval physician guessed. The modern doctor tests, observes, and acts with precision. Imagine a night with a deep cut from battle. A medieval healer might cauterize it with a red-hot iron or pack it with herbs. If infection set in, the patient often died. Today, we wash wounds with sterile solutions, close them with stitches, and protect them with antibiotics. Surgery is performed with anesthesia, in sterile rooms with precise instruments designed to save, not harm. The difference is not simply in comfort, it is in survival. What was once almost always fatal is now routine. Medieval hospitals, often run by monasteries, were places of refuge for the poor and dying. Care was focused on comfort, prayer, and rest. Few were cured. Modern hospitals are centers of science, filled with machines that monitor the heart, lungs, and brain. Specialists study every part of the human body. Operations are carried out with precision unimaginable in the Middle Ages. A hospital today is not a place to wait for death, but a place to fight for life. For medieval women, childbirth was one of the greatest dangers. Midwives relied on herbs, prayers, and experience. Complicated births often ended in tragedy. Infection after delivery claimed many mothers' lives. Today, childbirth is still a challenge, but with sterile conditions, trained doctors, pain relief, and surgical intervention when needed, survival is the rule, not the exception. The difference between then and now is the difference between chance and safety. When the Black Death struck in the 14th century, physicians had no tools to stop it. They burned herbs to cleanse the air, cut open veins to drain blood, and prayed for mercy. None of it worked. Millions perished. When we faced the COVID-19 pandemic in our own time, we carried fears, yes, but also weapons, testing, masks, vaccines, and treatments developed by science. It was still a painful and frightening time, but unlike the plague, it did not sweep away half the population. Knowledge saved lives. In medieval towns, quacks sold powders, charms, and potions, preying on the desperate. Many of these so-called cures were useless or deadly, and yet, because people had no alternative, they trusted them. Even today, charlatans exist. Fake cures and false promises spread quickly, especially in times of fear. But the difference is this: we now have evidence, research, and experts who can test and prove what is real and what is false. Science has given us a shield against ignorance, even if that shield must always be defended. And yet, for all the differences between medieval medicine and modern science, there is something timeless: human hope. Whether it was a monk pressing herbs into a wound, a mother whispering prayers over her sick child, or a modern doctor adjusting a machine to keep a patient alive, the spirit is the same. We want to save one another. We want to fight against death. We want to believe that there is always a way forward. Looking back, we might laugh at some medieval cures, burning herbs to fight the plague or drinking mercury to cleanse the body. But those treatments came from a world without microscopes, without laboratories, without centuries of accumulated science. They remind us that knowledge is earned slowly, painfully, over generations. And perhaps they also remind us that the medicine we take for granted today, the clean hospitals, the safe surgeries, the powerful drugs, are miracles built on centuries of trial and error. The story of medicine is the story of progress, of moving from darkness into light. Medieval medicine was dangerous, uncertain, and often deadly. Modern medicine is not perfect, but it is rooted in knowledge, research, and constant discovery. When we compare the two, we see more than just cures and curses. We see the journey of humanity itself, climbing step by step toward understanding. So as you rest tonight, let your mind wander between those two worlds. The dimly lit chambers of medieval healers, filled with chants and strange remedies, and the bright, sterile rooms of modern hospitals, filled with machines, doctors, and science. One world was ruled by fear, the other by knowledge, and between them lies the story of us all. If you enjoyed this quiet journey through history, I invite you gently to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next story. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. We always love to see where in the world these stories find their home. For now, close your eyes, let the worries of the day drift away, and step into sleep. Good night.